thank you very much. So throughout my career, one of the things that I really wish that I had was somebody to constantly be able to be a mentor as I continue to grow. I think that lots of times it's very easy for people to find out what they're doing wrong, but not as much around how to get better and execute better, create better outcomes, and so forth. And so really, what I really focused on doing was, trying to find some of those people who can provide a little bit of that help, and I got a little bit of help, but not nearly as much as I really would have wished for. And then also, I tried to read as much as I really could. As part of my career, one of the things that I experienced, and you guys can all hear me, right? I don't want to make it too loud. One of the things I experienced is that I've led 7 different turnarounds. Most of those were accidental, where I'd come into the organization, all of a sudden realize, oh boy, like what's going on in here, and how do they actually even get to where they were? And what that led me to find is that most of the problems for all of these different businesses, and these businesses ranged from hundreds of millions in revenue to much, much smaller than that. Almost all of the problems were sourced from just a few simple things that just weren't done very well, and they got exacerbated and created a huge amount of complexity in these businesses. And so what I'm really going to focus on a lot more is around the criticality of simplicity in every single organization, everything you're doing, and a focus on outcomes. So when you can glance at a little bit about my background, I began my career as an Air Force pilot. You can sort of see that plane way down there. Pretty big plane, a little bigger than 747, big cargo plane. I've flown all around the world. Graduated from the Air Force Academy then. I held leadership roles in some Fortune 500 companies, medium-sized businesses, and then some smaller businesses that started up, a handful of small ones as well. And then right now I run an advisory business, and I'm starting up a private equity firm right now. And both of those are really focused around healthcare and health tech, utilizing both operational excellence and AI. And then, by the way, if as an outcome for me, I hope that you guys can have some very positive takeaways, and as part of that, sometimes it's validating some of your learnings or something you don't really understand. So if you have a question, even while I'm going through, please raise your hand, and let's hit on that right away, because if you had that question, I'm sure everybody else has also. So when I was learning how to fly the C5 Galaxy, I had to learn, I had to almost memorize 4 binders full of information. So much so that, and it was all about how the C5 Galaxy ran. 4 different engines, 4 different hydraulic systems, fuel pumps, electrical systems, 7 gigantic fuel tanks that held 332,000 pounds of fuel. And how they all work together as a system to make the airplane fly. And we would joke that we understood these 4 binders so well that we would actually quiz each other as we were flying along across the Atlantic or the Pacific, going, "Hey, like, where does it say this?" And you go like, "Oh, that says it on page 3.35 in the upper right corner." I'm absolutely serious. You would really know exactly. You know these things so well. But you really want to, and by the way, here's an example of the C5 around what all the inner workings are. You can see the wing spars, the engines, and all the rest of those things. 2 levels, held about 4.5 Greyhound buses full of stuff on the bottom side and 100 people on the top. And fly many, many hours all around the world. But you learn all these things to be able to deal with emergencies. Like flying is generally pretty easy. You can almost teach a monkey how to do it, but dealing with the challenges and the problems and stuff like that was sometimes a lot more difficult, because you had to make the right decision at the right time, and hopefully that was really the right decision, because if it was the wrong decision, you're up in the air, and there's not a whole lot of other people to help you out. So this is what the cockpit looked like. So for all that complexity that I just shared with you, it's all managed right up here. And I remember when I was a really young kid, and I remember I used to ask to go up in the cockpit and check it out, because I thought it was really cool, electronics and like mechanical stuff. And you look in there and you see all these dials, all these switches, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so complicated. But we controlled all those other things from this small area right up here. But then when you zoom in a little bit, just a little bit further, you can see that each one of these things is there for a specific reason. It was intentionally designed so that you keep this plane flying. It's intentionally designed so I know what's going on with the engine, the fuel flow rate, and stuff like that. How far the nose is up, where the nose gear is in relation to the airplane. And there's not anything here that's not needed to keep us flying and achieving our mission. And then if I zoom in even further, this is telling me everything about the engine. Exactly what's going on with the engine. I'll glance at it, it looks right, and I can keep on moving forward. But what it doesn't have is it doesn't tell me what's going on with my margarita blender that's up in the top T-tail. It doesn't tell me what about the massage seats and the chairs. By the way, those aren't there because this plane was intentionally designed to fly on a mission. It doesn't have like other stuff that's not needed for achieving its mission, taking off, flying through the air, being safe, and landing on time, and then doing it over and over again. So, and this is what the airplanes do. Then they take off, they fly over, they have a few hours on the ground, then they land again. They're specifically designed to do that. The outcome is fly, land safely, stay on the ground, refuel, and keep going. That's typically what happens. And so when you go back and look at all this crazy stuff in the airplane, you go, okay, it was all intentionally designed for keeping us in the air, allowing us to achieve our mission. So, but businesses are different. And so when I go back to the example that I had around the 7 different big turnarounds that I've led, and I've been a CEO multiple times, and I've led a bunch of M&A, but the one thing that I saw was that the margarita machine is actually up in the tail in some businesses, or sometimes people, instead of fixing processes, they just hire more people, or they're insufficiently focused on the outcome they're trying to achieve. And I'll give you a few examples here. One business that I led a big turnaround on, I was looking at the finance team. And I was trying to understand how AP works, accounts payable, like how they pay their bills for this business. And I was just trying to understand the process, and then so I narrowly focused down to these three ladies who sat right next to each other. And I said, so like, walk me through, and this is really what I did, this isn't like a parable, walk me through what you do. And she goes, I get the information from the accounts payable person, and I make a pivot table. But I make a lot of pivot tables during the day. And okay, great. And then I said, well, like, what do you do with this pivot table? And then she goes, well, I give it to the person next to me. And then I go, so then eventually I set up some time to go talk with that person. And she makes another pivot table from the first 2 pivot tables that the person made the day before. And then, real story. And then she, again, makes all of her pivot tables, and then hands them over to the next person, person number 3, and what does she do? Pivot tables, right. She makes more pivot tables from the pivot tables from the pivot tables. I kid you not, and it goes all the way back to the person who runs AP. And it was crazy to see that. Again, these people were just adding complexity to something that they didn't really need to do. But it just happens sort of accidentally if you're not really intentional with what you're doing. So one more brief story to bring this home is that real big business, number 1 tech business in their particular space, and I was trying to understand why they were profitable. So I was wandering around, I was looking through their pricing manual, amongst other things, which had, that's how they determine pricing, right? So they would go into this Excel spreadsheet. There were no pivot tables in this one, but 40 tabs in this Excel spreadsheet. And I was like wandering through it going, okay, like, this is how you determine your pricing. But something didn't quite make sense. And nobody in the whole business understood the pricing model, which was somewhat of a challenge. So eventually I found this one person who understood this. She goes, oh yeah, there's another 40 worksheets that are hidden that I don't want anybody to change. So there was a total of 80 tabs in this Excel spreadsheet that manage this business's pricing. So I finally wind my way into one tab, which was actually the cost. The cost for doing everything else, the sort of the foundation for the cost, right? So for the pricing. So turned out that had been updated in 8 years, and she didn't even know that. And they were signing 3-year contracts on negative margin deals, and that created some pretty substantial problems for that business. But it just kept getting more and more, right? So that 1 or 2 tab pricing sheet became a few more because they wanted to make it a little bit better, and a little bit better, and a little bit better. Then eventually it became 40 tabs or 40 hidden tabs because the person didn't want everybody else to see the 40 other tabs and forgot about some of those things. Oh, and by the way, the person who I eventually cornered and said, well, like, why haven't you updated it? She said, well, I didn't create it. That person's gone. And then I think that business actually was, I think it was liquidated. I read the news about a week or 2 ago. This was a few years ago. So, but the point here is that no matter what stage you are in a business, do not let complexity take over your world. You constantly need to be thinking about, we're going to dive a lot more into this, around intentional design. Every single thing that you do needs to be purposely focused around the outcome you're trying to achieve for your business. And I cannot emphasize that enough. So as a business leader, no matter what stage you're in, you probably see some of these things, right? So many decisions to make. I'm totally overwhelmed, right? That happens everywhere, no matter what stage you're in. And then, if any of you have ever been in bigger businesses or smaller businesses, has anybody been in a meeting where you just go, I just lost an hour of my life?
Should have been an email.
Or maybe not even an email. Maybe it just should never even been part of like floating around anybody's brain, right? And then, or even something where people are starting to complain about, well, this process just isn't working right. And instead of just complaining about it, I would actually argue, well, do something about it. Don't let it get there, or if it does get there, then make sure you're intentional around fixing it so you get to that very intentional design and to the right outcomes. So one more real life example, and then I'll sort of bounce around here a little bit. So another tech biz. And again, I'm not going into a lot of details. These are all businesses, and this one's very alive and kicking right now. So I came into this business, and highly complex processes. Number one in their industry, right again, well over $100 million in financial support from investors. So this business, again, like we were talking about before, intentional design, the evil opposite of intentional design. So as far away as you could get from intentional design, that's what these folks did. As a matter of fact, it was a day-to-day grind for them. Let's just keep going and going and going. A bunch of smart people there, very smart people. But there was not a laser focus on the outcomes, or really around where they needed to go. They ended up spending inordinate, like millions and millions and millions of dollars on non-value-added work, activities, processes, engineering, products. Fill in all the blanks, they spent that. They even spent money on going out to an amazing ski area where they flew their whole business out to it for a week, which had nothing to do with that. And this business was burning money and not growing, and millions of dollars on a monthly basis. No strategy. The strategy I define to ground us is the path that you use in order to be able to get to what outcome you're trying to achieve. The path to grow, the path to go do stuff. My strategy to drive from here to California is I'm going to drive 10 hours a day. I'm going to stop here, and here. It's all measurable. I know I'm getting there. Maybe I pivot from going to San Francisco to LA, but at least I'm going in that direction. Lots of metrics, by the way, this company had.
so many metrics, it almost made your eyes want to cross. And you know what? None of them were valuable. None of them were focused on outcomes, which was awful, but also very clear as to why this business was all heading in the wrong direction. Is this unique? No. It's the same stuff, like I said, when I began the conversation, over and over and over again. It's the same stuff. The impact, monthly burn, product development cycle and cost, like I said, and then leadership for flying by the seat of their pants. Does anybody know where that concept came around, flying by the seat of your pants? I'm full of all these stupid gee whiz little things because I'm always really curious. So back in the olden days when pilots were flying, they didn't have all these instruments like I was showing you before that could tell you which way's up, which way's down. If you're turning it off, you just sort of knew that you were flying straight ahead, which was great when you had low performance airplanes and they couldn't fly upside down or do anything real crazy, and you're flying during the daytime because you look down to see the ground, you look up to see blue, and you know, okay, great. So now, let's say you fly in the middle of a cloud. Most of you guys have been in an airplane, and when you're inside of a cloud, it's white. And you don't know which way is up or which way is down. And then when you're flying straight and level, you have 1G that's pulling right through your bottom. You feel it right through the seat of your pants. But then what happens is that for higher performance airplanes, or even a commercial airplane or an F-16 or something like that, if you go into a turn, your 1G might now be pointing down this way. Or if you're pulling down like this right to the ground, your 1G could be going up this way. So the seat of your pants could be pointed straight up instead of down at nighttime or when you can't see. So flying by the seat of your pants, unfortunately, didn't lend well for a lot of pilots in the early days of flying before they had instruments that would tell them which way is up and which way is down. That's called an attitude indicator, by the way, in an airplane. So we're going to dive just a little bit more deeper here. This is one of my favorite quotes. And again, every company is perfectly designed to get the results you're getting, which is sort of interesting because however way your company is designed is what you're getting. And it's funny because if you're building your business and you're getting the wrong outcomes, you designed it to get the wrong outcomes. All right, so quiz time. And I'm going to pick on people. All right, who knows the answers to X or Y? Or any guesses? What percent of time making decisions, a certain percent of decisions are effective? What percent of time are you making decisions versus those that are effective? What do you say?
Just the 83 principle?
Maybe 3%? 3% are effective? Yeah. Okay, then how much of the time are you making decisions?
Yeah, 80-20.
Yeah, probably 80% making decisions. Okay. What about, what's the correlation to good decisions?
Percentage of decisions that are good decisions?
Yeah, a certain percent of correlation that are related to the good decisions. Okay, here let's look at the answers here. So, 37% of the time you're making decisions while you're in business, whether you're whatever those decisions you're making. Yet a very small percent of those are actually effective. Now, who's been in a business where people couldn't make decisions? Right? Yeah, exactly. Because why can't they why aren't they making decisions? What's the reason why they're not making decisions?
Too many options to decide from?
Yeah, too many options. They're afraid of making a mistake. Absolutely. You're afraid of making mistakes, so you just don't make the decision. Why?
Power to make decisions?
Sometimes it requires some power to make decisions. Yeah, absolutely. And what else? Go ahead.
No consensus?
Yeah, no consensus. People are afraid that, okay, like, I need to have consensus to make the decision, so I'm just not going to make it. And yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So, doesn't that paralyze your business, though? If you can't make a decision, then
quick story. Big business. I needed an $80 million decision. All right, that required board approval from a public company. This business was infamous for not making decisions and a huge amount of bureaucracy. They needed to make this decision before prices went up, and they were going to almost double the price. It was going to go up like $40 million or $50 million or something like that. Huge, huge price. It took them double the amount of time they paid the higher price, just because they're afraid of making decisions. And again, this business was just being on the inside. They're incredibly afraid of just making decisions, making the wrong decision, because people got punished for that at that business. So what about, how many applications are we managing on a daily basis? Whether they're on your phone, TikTok, oh gosh, okay, how many? 20?
I have
30?
like a million tabs open on my computer.
Okay, all right, 1 million, and they're, okay, great. Anyway, who else has?
10.
How many? 10? Good.
My son counted 114 apps on my phone the other day.
Okay, and they're all probably like telling you stuff, right? All right, great. Yeah, I know, it's incredible. And then what percent of people multitask in businesses, or excuse me, in meetings? Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, sometimes, right? And then here's the crazy thing is that when you're multitasking, you're triple tasking or X-tasking, you're not doing anything very well, by the way. And I always ask anybody who's in a meeting of mine to, this is important enough for us all to have you here. Don't do anything. And if you feel like you need to do that, we'll find somebody else. Because it's so... Oh, like...
No, put the
like that.
sensor down.
Oh, got it. Okay, thanks. But it's if we're participating in a meeting, hopefully those people really need our insight and our knowledge and everything else. But if we're not able to provide that 100% input, then maybe there's something else we should be doing, or we're not going to be able to create that value that we really need to be able to provide. And then how long do you guys think it takes after you've been taken off of a focus? 5 minutes. Yeah. What else?
10.
It
10.
depends.
45.
Depends
Yeah.
on the individual.
It depends, right? It depends. It's actually the number is actually 23, but it actually ranges depending on how focused you are, from up to 25 minutes from a low of 9. So every time you're messing around with your applications, or you're focusing here, then focusing here, then focusing here, you're not really providing the value you need to be able to provide. And then what happens? It takes longer to make those decisions. It takes longer to start doing things, maybe make more mistakes. Here's just a few other things I wanted to share with you guys. We spend 50% of our time in meetings, yet we talked about this before. How many times have we been in a meeting and all of a sudden you're like, why did I just lose an hour or two of my life? This was awful. I can tell you that's happened to me more times than I can count. And then the survey, business leaders are just very dissatisfied with meeting efficiency. But we've talked about like changing things and being very intentional with what you do, but people aren't doing that. And then lastly, hours spent on strategic decisions, which is important, yet we don't really do that. We spend a lot of stuff on tactical. And then really for you guys, the last thing here is business overload. We're doing a lot of admin work, and there's a 68% 2-year survival rate for small businesses. So, good friend of mine, I have lunch with him every once in a while, and we start talking about business stuff and stuff like that, and he says, and he goes, oh, I've got this problem. And he goes, Greg, he goes, before you say anything, I already know what you're going to tell me. And it's a joke, because what do I say? I say, well, what are you going to do about it? Because we can complain about problems or challenges with inside of our business, but the only person who can do something about that is us. He's the CEO of the local business here, by the way. It's us. We need to figure out what the priorities are and go do that. So let's dive into this a little bit more around how to fix all these things, because I've given you a bunch of problems. I saw you all like continue to nod and nod and nod. And so this is how you do it. So this is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. pretty easy to make. But it's pretty easy. You can mess it up also though, right? If like you're not really familiar with how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, maybe peanut butter goes on the top, the jelly goes on the bottom, and then the two pieces sort of get sliced together. I think there's a video I've seen somewhere on social media where the father messes around with his kids and asked them to tell him exactly how to make it, and then they, anyway, I'm just droning on here. But the one thing here is that you always have to be intentional. So if you weren't watching it, my spelling here going, oh, Greg didn't really know what he was doing. I was trying to catch your attention, but we really need to be intentional with what we're doing. So this is the book that I wrote, and it's really focused. It's a parable, sort of like "Can Move My Cheese," but a critical thing that every single business needs to do, foundationally how you operate, are these three things. Simplify before you add. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Make it easy before you start adding new stuff.
Yeah, what happens if you don't?
Just get a bunch of processes.
Yeah, you get a bunch of junk. You get more junk. Right, exactly. So, all right. Since you go, here's the free book. Okay, so what about clarity before clever? What does that mean? Go ahead.
Just seeing the widespread impact of something
Yeah.
for implementation.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. One more. If you want to pass that down. All right, great. And then results before activity. You and I talked about this earlier, right? So what do I mean by this? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, you need to perform some action and then do the metrics. It's
Yeah. So you want to know what the results are going to be before you perform something, right? So what you want to know is, and you get this last one. So what you want to know is, where am I going? What am I trying to do before I start doing work, right? Because if I start doing work, I can't tell you how many businesses I've seen flying by the seat of their pants again, right? We talked about that. We're not going to fly by the seat of our pants. We need to know what results we want to achieve before we start doing work. Because otherwise, we're just droning. We're jumping in our car and we're going, hey, let's just drive. Who knows where we're going to get until we run out of gas. So, the simplicity test. So, it's so easy to make things complicated inside of a business. But we always need to keep these three things in mind: simplicity, results, and clarity. And maybe one way of thinking about simplicity is really, can I explain it at a party? Can I explain it to my grandmother? Would she understand it? Would I bet my own money on it as an entrepreneur, as a startup founder? You're already betting your own money on it, but can I explain it to somebody else, or can I explain it to my 6-year-old to be able to understand it? Lots of times, it's probably too complicated, and you're not going to be able to do it. But you can do little baby pieces, right? Maybe there's this big thing that I'm going to do, but I want to break it into little bite-sized chunks that are simple at that point, right? So, who knows who these guys are? Who? Yes. Okay. The Office, one of the best shows ever. All right. And so we've talked about meetings a lot, but how do we fix them? How do I not lose an hour of my life? I would actually argue, change how you do meetings. If you're a small business, if you're a few of you, if you're in a medium size, whatever you're doing, no outcome, no meeting. Start with the outcome, right? Everything is focused on outcomes in our business. Every single thing is focused on outcomes. What are we trying to achieve out of this meeting? Is it a decision? Is it agreement? Is it whatever that is? And then how we're going to do it. And at the very end, you've achieved that, whether that's 5, 10 minutes, or whatever. And I'm actually going to tell you a little more about how to do this. So, is the outcome we're trying to achieve? Align our top 3 priorities. Approve the pricing tiers. But sometimes
sometimes it's easier said than done. Here's the secret, all right? So, bless you. So, the first portion, so lots of times you'll say, hey, you'll send a pre-read out to people. Hey, could you please read this in advance? How many people read it in advance? 0. Never worth it, right? Maybe send it out in advance. I always take the first 15 minutes and we all review it there, right? Because that way I know that everybody will review it. And I like to avoid brainstorming because that sort of gets things out of hand. I'm going to give my proposal and the rationale and the data around why, 6 pages max. Maybe 2 pages or 1 page. It needs to be easy to understand. And then the person presents it. If it's 1 person or 2 people, you can still keep this in mind. Everything needs to be focused on outcomes. And then review it, Q&A, make the decision. And this is going to take you very far because you've achieved an outcome every single time. Team huddle, small groups. 1 week, once a week, once a day, agile, right? You're very familiar with this. So a stand-up. Is anybody not familiar with what stand-ups are? You're familiar with it? Okay. So they call them stand-ups because you can't stand for very long, so it makes it pretty easy, right? 10-minute max, and priorities, blockers, decisions that need to be made, and then you move on. It aligns everybody around what's going on so you can move forward. Start out weekly, then go from there around how it adds value to create your outcomes. Metrics. So, first day I joined Oracle, sitting down with my general manager who ran Oracle Health Sciences, and we're reviewing the IT dashboard, the monthly review performance dashboard. We had 4 pages of this for all their numbers. I kid you not. It was like font 2, and there's like 60 trillion different metrics. And I'm all like, okay. I almost went to go to sleep, but that wouldn't be a good idea for me on the first day. But I didn't understand what was important. I didn't understand what was allowing them to achieve the outcomes for the value or the value for the business at all. All I saw were just a bunch of nice to know things which sort of worked their way in there over time, right? Complexity, kept adding complexity. Let's add this, let's add that. And so, again, I look at metrics the same way I look at everything else. The outcome for every single business out there, unless you're a nonprofit, it's only 2 things: revenue and cost. And early on, it might be you're burning some cash, and that's fine. But the goal eventually is to do that, and you still want to be measuring that. And then the things that are inputting into that. You should have a few metrics, other things roll into that, but this is really going to be very, very helpful. It's simple, it's not complex, and no nice to haves. It's only what drives the top and bottom line. Decision making. We've talked about that a bunch of times. And it's crazy how much that can paralyze a business, big or small, or 1 person or 2. Because what if I'm wrong? Does anybody have any ideas? Like, is there a best practice around making decisions, by the way, that any of you guys use? Okay. So this is what I really like to use, and this works really well for me. There's a concept called one-way door versus two-way door. It came from Jeff Bezos. I didn't create it. And the concept is that 90%-ish of decisions, or maybe it's 95% of decisions, are two-way doors. What that means is you can make that decision in 4 seconds, and if it turns out it's not a very good decision, you go right back through that door and negligible impact to your business. Make those decisions and move forward. Don't paralyze yourself. That small percent of decisions, those are the ones you need to think a little more about. The ones that are going to have a huge impact in your business. And whatever those things are, but think about impact, negative impact, and the probability of that happening. Most of them, very low probability, make it quickly and move on. I'll never forget early on in my career when
I was having trouble because I was really afraid of this. And I was actually, it was really interesting. I was doing a startup business and a bigger business. So we were given the capital with very high goals and the threat of losing our jobs if we weren't successful, because it was in GE, sort of, it tended to be a do or die type business. And then I remember my boss coming over to me one day and was like, Greg, like, it's been a month and you haven't like done X. And I'm like, I'm doing all this research. I want to make sure we get the best thing. He goes, just go, and then he used his favorite 4-letter sentences and paragraphs, go buy them. And we ended up spending like a few $100,000 at that point, which was apparently a rounding error according to finance. And we went to go do it, and it turned out really well, and we learned and moved on. But it didn't matter. And so as we're moving forward, and one of the requests that I was asked to do was like, how do we kick off the new year? We're rolling in towards the end of the year. We're finishing up things up. We're putting icing on the cake. We're learning. We're moving forward. But what are some of the things that we might be able to? And I hate New Year's resolutions because those things never work. But what can we learn? What are like the few things that we can do a whole lot better to allow our businesses to be just a little bit more successful, right? It doesn't have to be a whole lot if we focus on outcomes and intentional design. Is it to kill that one meeting that we don't really need because it's not creating value? Kick off the 10-minute huddle, a few metrics, and then, if it's not going in the right direction, what does that trigger? What kind of action does that trigger? Nothing should ever be nice to know in metrics. It's going well, good. If it's not going well, I'm going to go do this. Or maybe if it's doing really well, I'm going to go do this. Everything should trigger an action. What are the decisions you need to make, and get those done? Maybe you push them up, push them down. Don't let them paralyze your business. It's not going to hurt you. Move forward. And then last, subtract day. Start removing stupid stuff from your processes, because I guarantee you can make them a whole lot simpler. So, from chaos to clarity, hopefully we got a little more clear. We're avoiding accidental complexity, and we're getting to the outcomes that we really, really need. So, my favorite quote once again, whenever you're heading in the wrong direction, or whenever you're going, oh boy, like, what's happening? Think about this. You're probably designed to get that. You just need to pivot. You need to switch. You need to understand you're heading in the wrong direction before it's too late, because it happens. Don't let it happen. And there we go. I'm exactly on time. All right. What do you know? So what questions do you have for me? Go ahead.
I just want to say, I think it's a really great blueprint for business, but I think it's a great blueprint for life.
It really is. It's everything, but really, really insightful. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about going from an environment where there was a lot of clarity to an environment that may have been more chaotic and dynamic, and going from, the military to business?
Yeah, absolutely. So 1 second here. It's interesting. So even the military is a little. Was anybody in the military here, by the way? Okay. So even the military is a little bit chaotic. But as part of the environment there, there's sort of like a can-do attitude around, like, just go get it done, like within the constraints that you have, like nothing illegal, nothing that's going to hurt or kill people, but you have to make decisions all the time. Flying in the Air Force was black and white. It's either you're allowed to do this, and you're not allowed to do that, and that's for a variety of safety things. And it was interesting. So when I first left the military and I started working for GE, it was a similar type environment where it was just a go get stuff done environment. And so it was very similar in nature, where you might not know everything, and you're a level of you might be working in an environment of uncertainty. I mean, when I would take an airplane out to some foreign country, I was the guy in charge, and I can't tell you how many times I'm all like, oh boy, like what do I do here? And I can't go call mom, I can't call my parents. That's something I just have to figure out, which is ever hopefully the right thing to do. You know, no international incidents, don't get shot and killed, and and try to do the right thing. I think that in the bigger businesses like GE and Amazon, they do a lot of things I would say right, and they really focus in their meritocracies, and they would get rid of a lot of the uncertainty and the goofiness.